Hello, and welcome to today's episode of What to Read Today. Have you ever, in your wildest imagination, considered the remote possibility that you could be a member of a cult? Yeah, think about it right now. Is there any chance whatsoever that you belong to a cult? You may not know about it. You may not think it is a cult, but it is a cult. For people like you and I, most of us, it's going to be no chance. Well, Cult Bride, How I Was Brainwashed and How I Broke Free by Liz Cameron. Cult Bride, How I Was Brainwashed and How I Broke Free by Liz Cameron. See, this book, I've always said, especially on this channel, I want to read books from people who have lived or live a life that is different from the majority of us. A life or a story where you begin to think, how is this even possible? Stories that teach us, that shows us what it is or what it means to live like the other people or someone just outside of our usual lifestyle. In Cult Bride, we get introduced to Liz, who is the author, a young woman who has just finished high school. So we are talking between the ages of 16, 17, 18, still trying to figure out her life. And she is out as a young person in the mall in Canberra, Australia, out in the mall, having fun with her girlfriends and just being a young person. And she gets approached by a woman asking her to complete a survey, would like to speak to you, would like to follow up. We're trying to learn about a particular issue. And that was how she got herself introduced to cults, a religious cult. She became groomed, and she also had the honor of grooming other young women. It was only after she had a medical episode and the intervention of her parents, her mother precisely, that she came to see that this religious association I belonged to, they made me pray, I read my Bible. However, they had other undertones of things that should have gone, things like send us photos of yourself. Things like you are the spiritual bride of the leader of this group based in South Korea. Things like when you sleep, think of yourself as making out with the spiritual leader. You needed to restrict your food and, food intake and lose weight and modeling. They were grooming her for perfection, to be the perfect bride. As you get to meet Liz, one thing I learned from this book is we all have this idea of what cults should look like or should be, and it's far removed from our everyday realities. It's like those people who behave weirdly, those people who do strange stuff. But how about taking time out to think? If I belong to any association, any group, any community activity or event where they want us to behave in a certain kind of way, it's a group think. We live by rules and regulations, what we can do, what we cannot do, especially When they begin to tell you, you cannot tell your parents, your friends, your family about all of this. Think again. So Liz here introduces us to this cult, which, funny enough, is still operating around the world. It's a it's a group that has started out in South Korea, but now operates, according to Liz, in 60 to 70 countries globally, including here in Australia. And their modus operandi is to target young people, most likely in the universities, and begin to groom them and brainwash them, which would make sense because young people are the fertile ground for new ideas, for innovations. They are seeking to do things. In Cult Bride, Liz tells us how her mother began to suspect something was wrong when Liz, who has a very close and strong relationship with her mother and would always tell her mother things and truth, started to lie to her mother, was no longer coming home to visit, moved in with these other ladies of the cult. The mother or the father would go to visit. They would say, she's not there. Liz is not at home. Meanwhile, Liz is around. Liz started to become short-tempered with her parents and family members and her previous church community. Like, they don't understand, they are not Christian enough, they are not doing Christianity right, and things like that. In this book, similar to the other book I introduced 2 weeks ago, For the Love of a Son by Scott Oak, which talks about addiction. In that video, if you haven't seen it, I will pop the link up for you too. In that video, I said the book made me think about addiction differently because I used to think of addiction as well as people not willing to give up the bottle or not willing to give up drugs or not willing to live better. But after reading that book, I have more empathy and more, I'm more considerate of what it means to fall under addiction. It's not so much a thing of willpower. Same thing again. Here is a book that will teach you when it comes to cults. None of us, again, similar to what Scott Oak said in the book about addiction, how his son struggled with addiction, none of us is immune. I have started to reevaluate all the various communities and associations I belong to and ask myself, is there any element of cult going on here? Think of cult not so much in the narrow sense of it. It may be that's what you belong to, but any form of association where you're being shaped in a way and manner that limits your own free thinking, that limits your ability to question rules and regulations and why do we have to do this? Broaden the scope of what a cult is far beyond what we traditionally know it to begin to ask yourself, is this something I want to, or a group I want to be part of and belong to? Are they making me do things outside of my personal preferences? Am I being isolated from the rest of my family and friends? Well, if you answer yes, you may be part of a cult. Please consider carefully and read this book on how Liz came out of it. It may be useful. The good thing about this book is Liz also provides lots of resources for people who would like to read more. So there are references to some academic publications and, industry publications, government publications that could help anyone wanting to break free from the hold of any cult. That's it for this week. I recommend please grab a copy, get yourself acquainted, get yourself educated on what cult looks like in today's world. These are everyday people living next to you, attending the same school or workplace, same religious community associations, and all the things we do. They are normal people. They look normal. They act normal. But behind that veneer, something sinister might be going on. There you have it. Until next time on what to read today, keep well, keep reading. I will see you. Bye bye.